Hi, how are you doing? I get it. One of the scariest things to think about when buying a home is being taken advantage of. Let's face it, we all have that distant aunt or uncle who has a horror story about the time they lost thousands of dollars because their realtor or their lender screwed him over. And you're scared of that happening to you. I get it. Here's the thing though, the best defense you can have against being taken advantage of is being educated. So what I'm going to do for you today is this. I'm going to break down the three most common ways home buyers are taken advantage of in this market. Then I'm going to share with you guys some real life horror stories either I or I've heard of happen with each one. My goal with this video is for you to be more educated and be aware. So I can't say 100% guarantee you're going to have the best experience, but you're going to be a lot more difficult to take advantage of. So here's the first one that's actually probably going to bite me in the ass a little bit, but hey, maybe I like getting bit in the ass. When you're looking to hire a lender or realtor, don't just talk with one and then stop your search, okay? I get it. You probably found the most beautiful, amazing, smart real estate agent to have ever existed who has text messages interrupting the video. I once met somebody through a consultation at my office. They showed up, said hi, we did the usual thing, and ended up finding out that they've actually been looking for months already with a real estate agent. Not just any real estate agent, but according to him in the Hispanic radios, there's this one realtor that just advertises nonstop. He thought, home buyers don't know what they don't know, so he called her thinking that she was going to be the best. So he tells me that this realtor told him that the way they were going to do things and the way they did things for 3 months is this realtor would email him houses whenever they would come out in his budget. If he likes one, he was to let them know so they can send an offer on his behalf, not looking at the house. And on top of that, this person had him sign a blank offer. And literally every time he would make an offer, they would say, okay, what do you want to offer? Okay, great. And they would send it over. And he needed closing costs. So in this market, it's just impossible to do that. So he would be making lowball offers with closing costs. He wasn't even signing the offers. It was just randomly sending them, never looking at them. Okay, for those who have bought a home, you guys are probably like cringing really hard right now because everything is wrong about this. If he had talked to somebody else, even if it's not an interview, maybe it's a phone call, just like, hey, I'm looking to buy a home and just trying to see what the process is like, he would have seen a different experience, right? Now, there's a chance that maybe you're not going to be that much taken advantage of like this guy was, but still having a conversation with not just one person, but 2 or 3 people will help you kind of figure out the different styles out there. There are several realtor styles out there. There's your laid back guy who's there with you, feels like a really great friend. And then there's the hustle muscle guys that are emailing you, texting you every time there's a new house, shows up in a suit. Whatever your style is, that's up to you. But having that conversation with multiple people will help. And I mean this, like even with me, like I've had people reach out to me and then they're like, hey, you know what? You're not my cup of tea. I'm going to go work with someone else. Or you're like, okay, it's just part of the business. So please, please, please do yourself a favor. Don't just talk to one person. Open yourself to several conversations so you can learn if something's off about your situation, or perhaps you can find someone that's a little better suited for your style. My second biggest tips on preventative measures to not get taken advantage of is understanding your rights. Now, I'm not meaning like civil rights or anything like that. I'm talking about your rights as a buyer. Let me start off with the horror story, okay? I found out it was a few years ago, I found out a cousin of mine or a distant cousin of mine bought a home and he wasn't very happy. I'm like, dude, you already broke my heart because you didn't use me. Why aren't you happy about it? He's like, well, I freaking bought a house because I need an RV gate for my work truck. And it turns out, I moved here and they don't even allow my work truck to be parked in the RV gate because they, freaking some stupid rule. I'm like, that's crazy. Like, so what are you doing? He's, I don't know. I freaking parked it in my friend's house. I shouldn't even bought the stupid house. And I'm like, okay. I told him you were aware that had the HOA disclosure sent to you, and that on the Arizona purchase contract, it says once you receive the HOA rules and regulations, you have 5 days to let the seller know if you want to cancel or move forward. And he's like, what? Like, yeah, you should have received all the HOA paperwork, and you would have read there that they don't allow work trucks over a certain height or whatever. And within 3 to 5 days, you would have the ability to cancel your contract and get your deposit back. If that was a big issue, that's been something that you should have double checked. You have to read the purchase contract. Here in Arizona, and I like to say probably most states, the residential purchase contract protects the buyer heavily. Here's the thing, that purchase contract has been amended hundreds of times. And every time there's a new lawsuit about what something happens, they amend it to add that protection. So by you not understanding that purchase contract fully, you're basically all the freaking lawsuits that ever happened in your state that for some reason the buyer got screwed over and now they added to the contract, you're just like throwing those to the wind and you're not really understanding your protections. So here's what I recommend, okay? What usually happens is you start looking for a house, you end up finding a house. It turns out that you need to make an offer within like hours. So they send over the offer, to get DocuSign. You click and sign, you move forward. And most of the time, let's face it, even though you'll say you'll read it, most of the time you will not read it. You'll get the gist of it, you'll scroll, you'll click, and you'll sign, and you move on, right? But you didn't really take the time you needed to really make sure to understand it. So what could you have done? Well, one thing you could have done is when you start looking for a home, get a copy of the purchase contract. It's not difficult. Have your agent send a blank one to you and start reading through it. If it seems complicated, have your agent answer any questions you might have. What you want to look out for is three things: contingencies, your protections, and certain phrases or lines that are left empty that can be adjusted. So contingencies, like for example, in Arizona, we have the appraisal contingency, we have the loan denial contingency, we have inspection contingency. It's the definition of a contingency, if I recall correctly, and I hope I'm right because this will look really dumb on the video, is something that can't be predicted, something that's unknown, right? So for example, in Arizona, we have an appraisal contingency, so we don't know what it's going to appraise for, right? So the appraisal contingency states if the appraisal comes in low in the property, the buyer and seller have 5 days to renegotiate terms, and if they're not renegotiated, the buyer's taking it as is and has to make up the difference. Now, really crucial details there. 5 days. And if they're not able to solve the problem, then the buyer gets back their earnest money, right? Really important, crucial thing to know. And something you wouldn't even know you had unless your realtor told you or you read through it. Want to make sure you understand those. If this guy would have read the contract, he would have seen that on the contract, or the addendums at least, it says there, the HOA contingency, that you have 5 days to read it, and if you don't have a copy, you have a right to request it. Title company has to send it to you, etc., etc. And of course, the other two protections, like what's your protections? In case something were to go wrong, how are you protected? Some kind of natural disaster and damages the property, you want to know what your outs are, right? And the things that can be added, I mean, you want to make sure if there's an empty line there where it says it's X amount of dollars to be added, or the days of inspection, or if the refrigerator, washer, and dryer is a blank check mark, those are things to watch out for when you're signing, because as you'll see in the next tip, little things like that can be adjusted and added by the realtor that you might not even notice, and you can get completely taken advantage of that way. So learn from the mistakes of all the past buyers and the lawsuits they had, and all the ones that were taken advantage or not taken advantage of. That contract is there to protect you. Understand it, read through it, and even if you don't understand it 100%, if you understand just a piece of it, you're already have a huge advantage over somebody who's just clicking and signing and not reading through it. The third and final one has to do with cost, right? The biggest one that people fear is, what if at the closing table it turns out I need a lot more money than I have? And I like to say, fortunately, it hasn't happened too much in the last few years. There are some stories, and the one I'll tell you is recently, but luckily it doesn't appear to have been an issue as much as it was in the 2000s, the early 2000s. So horror story for you. Client, younger woman and his mother. The reason I know this story is an escrow officer told it to me. Were there at the signing table, right? They were so happy. They were so excited about their new home, and they told the story about how much they worked to get to that point, and et cetera, et cetera. They had made a statement about, but it's interesting how we had to come up with a little more than what we thought, but at the end of the day, they're religious, so they were like, God is good, and we made it happen, and we worked the extra part-time hours and all this stuff, right? Extra hours. As a title officer is going, getting everything signed, she noticed on the settlement statement that there was like an extra $1,000 fee, and it said like a real estate agent or a brokerage fee or something like that. And she sees these all the time, and she was like, well, what's this? She's like, hey, this is odd. This is an extra $1,000 here. You just told me that you're coming up with extra money. You're getting left with no money. These $1,000 would probably help you. You might want to call your realtor and find out what this fee is. They call the real estate agent. It turns out the real estate agent added an extra bonus to the commission of his through, I think it was either an addendum or on the contract, or somehow or another, it was added. and they didn't know. They just signed, and they're thinking, everything that was sent their way, they just signed, and they thought it was normal. Something happened or the other, and I think they still had to pay it because they were already contracted to close the next day, and they needed to fulfill that. And they bought their house, and sure, the guy's not getting any future business, but he got $1,000. And can you believe how much people he did it to? I'll be honest with you guys. If you don't know by now, my name's Javier, probably of Hispanic origin. The Hispanic community gets taken advantage of all the time because of this, because they don't speak English, they don't read through things, so people add little fees and extra, and they're told what to pay, and they pay. Maybe you don't deal with it as an English speaking person, but still, of course, this is terrible and probably the worst thing that can happen, other than not getting your house. But here's some ways to prevent that from happening. First and foremost, let's talk about the lending side. A lot of people get shocked about the closing costs they might have or experience. And the lender, I mean, this is not a tip. This is already, if your lender's not doing this, then you're already like, they should at least be doing this as default. If they're not doing it, you need to find a new lender. When they pre-approve you, they're going to give you an estimated sheet, like the estimated cost, the closing cost, what they think it's going to be. And they'll always say it's just an estimate. We don't know, because they don't know the title fees or any other fees the house might have. But they're going to give you an idea up front. But a further step to this is when you start looking for a house and you start finding houses you like, a simple text message to the lender saying, hey, I'm really liking this house. Can you break down the closing cost? Even if you don't end up getting it, it'll help you get a better idea of what the closing cost would be for that house. And odds are you'll continue to look at similar type of houses. So you're going to have a really great idea of what the closing costs are going to be, right? Not too bad. It's still estimated. You're still not really sure, but you're going to have a much better idea of what these closing costs are going to be. And especially in a market like this, where buyers are mostly paying their closing costs, it's really crucial to know this. So let's say you're under contract now and you get the first disclosure statement or from the lender, and the closing costs and the interest rate are a lot higher than you originally thought. I had a client of mine actually currently going through escrow that's experiencing this right now. And it's a shocker. Like, oh my gosh, this is a lot higher than I thought. What do I do? Am I obligated to stay with this lender? What do we do? The reality is you could switch lenders if you wanted to during escrow. The new lender would really have to step up to make sure to close really efficiently and on time. So what you want to do is, as soon as you're in escrow, push the lender to give you some kind of estimated fees immediately. You probably have an inspection period within 5 to 10 days. Some people, you might call it differently in your state. Basically, it's your time to inspect the house and back out for any reason if you find something concerning. If you find out that the costs are a lot higher than what they were estimating, or the interest rate was a lot higher, then you can find out early on and back out early on, right? That way they don't catch you towards the end of the transaction and now you're forced to go through with it. Regarding the real estate agent fee, I mean, I guess for these people, they read English and they spoke English. So what really was the problem here? I mean, if you're dealing with somebody that's just going to sneak in a fee like that and you sign for it, then it's as easy as reading what you're signing, right? And, if you had done the research on the purchase contract, you looked at those blank spaces and you're like, oh, someone could add a fee here if they wanted to, then just when you're signing the contract, just look out for those things. You don't have to reread the whole contract every time, but, hey, this empty space has $1,000 on it now. Why is that? Or when you're signing an employment agreement with the buyer's agent, like, hey, how much is there an extra fee to this? Anytime you sign any kind of document, try to look at, is this going to cost me more? Is there an extra fee associated with this? And then making sure that they're explaining to you properly. If there's a language barrier, making sure you get a translator. All these things seems pretty straightforward, but believe it or not, so many people do not even bother doing even one of them. So I do strongly believe if you do follow through with these 3 things, you're going to have a much sharper eye to catch little things like that, right? Someone said I needed an outro lately, so here's what I'm going to do. If you guys don't mind, I'm going to sing you guys a song. I just really care about you guys a lot, and I call this song My Homegirl Homies. I love you.